Remembering the past is of vital importance both to individuals studying family history, but also society as a whole, especially as we grapple with increasing hatred and divisiveness. Seattle resident Michael Jacobson knows this lesson all too well. He's the grandnephew of Werner Holländer. Werner was a gentle and kind and very well-liked Jewish engineer who was ultimately tried and executed during the Holocaust. Well, just this last month, Michael and other members of Werner's family traveled to the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. to donate pictures and artifacts from Werner's life. Michael joins me now. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
This is a project you actually started in COVID. Tell me about that. You called it the rabbit hole.
So I inherited a box of artifacts, papers, and photographs from my mom, who inherited it from her younger sister, who inherited it from my great aunt, who inherited it from my great grandmother.
Wow.
So it was unsorted, it was piles of photographs, and I just started getting into it and matching cleft chin with cleft chin picture, trying to figure out who was in what picture, trying to understand where each picture was taken, what year it was in.
Oh my goodness.
And I started documenting every one of these artifacts. There were letters, there were official documents, there was a letter from the Vatican. There were all sorts of interesting things that I couldn't piece together. So I started to map these out and try to identify how all these pieces related to each other.
I mean, that is a huge project, and what an undertaking. Tell me, Werner, what did you learn about him?
So I had heard about Werner's story through the family, but I didn't know some details. In fact, there were some misfacts about him carried down through the family, as often happens. And there were a couple of books, scrapbooks that he had put together of trips that he had taken. So
Really?
It had friends. There were pictures of him skiing. He liked motorcycles, and he was very popular with men and women. I mean, they were the pictures of him skiing and going on hikes. And so I started uncovering more about his life story. A lot of the documents in the archive, though, were about his imprisonment, his arrest and imprisonment.
Let's talk about that.
Sure.
Werner was ultimately killed because of something that the Nazis referred to as race defilement. Tell me about those charges.
Yeah, so an interesting twist to all this is that the Nazis actually studied U.S. racial segregation laws and then imported those to Germany and then enforced them rather strictly. So in the 30s, there was something called the Nuremberg laws, and that basically created Jews as a separate race, and an inferior race in the Nazis' eyes. And so if there was mixing between a Jewish person and a non-Jewish person, that was considered race defilement, Rassenschande. The English word is miscegenation, which fortunately most people don't know these days, but it basically means intermarriage or relations between different races. So he had a girlfriend. She got pregnant. It's a little unclear how he was turned in. There's one story about a piano teacher that she confided in her piano teacher, and the piano teacher then told the Nazis. So he gets arrested and put in jail, and then he's actually put on trial for this race defilement crime.
Oh my goodness. I mean, was there any hope? Why even with the trial, with the way that the Nazis were handling
That's
these
a great
things?
question. So he had a Hungarian passport. So he was being treated at that time as a foreign national, and he had been baptized. I would say that they were not religiously Jewish, nor were they religiously Christian, but he had sort of the paperwork to, give him the proper handling, if you will.
Got it.
And then there were efforts. The letter with the Vatican was to get some intercession to get him out of jail, but in fact that didn't work in the end. I have his prison diary is not quite the right, is like a kind of a journal that he was keeping, and he was talking about where his artifacts should go and who should get things. So he kind of realized at one point that it was kind of hopeless, and he kind of made peace with himself, knowing that his fate was somewhat sealed.
Even the Vatican interceding could not stop
that
these
wasn't going to change it.
monsters
That wasn't going to change
from what they did.
That's right.
Ultimately, he was killed, and your family has to live with that. You recently traveled with them. Actually, your family from all over the world recently traveled with you to D.C. to present these artifacts to the Holocaust Museum. What was that like for you? Yeah,
so we'd known that these documents and things were interesting. We didn't quite understand the significance of them, but the Holocaust Museum was very interested in the set of documents that showed his whole life, including the prison journals, including the work of his fraternal twin sister to get him justice after the war. Her name was Helga, and she fought she wrote to American authorities to get him out. And for me, it was very emotional, as one might imagine. And but it was also, the surprise emotion for me was relief, because these things were in my basement, and I was taking good care of them. They were sorted and secure and in acid-free containers and all that sort of thing. But knowing that they were going to the Holocaust Memorial Museum allowed me to just breathe a sigh of relief, know that they would be taken care of, know that they could be available for researchers and further preservation.
I have the chills, because I think that there's so many of us out there that don't know and have these things laying around and haven't really looked at them. But you're such a great example of why it's important to pay attention to these things left behind. Remembering and saying the names of these people are also very important in our hearts and souls. Tell me why that is to you in your own words.
So I think it personalizes the individual. It personalizes the individual story. It helps you connect. This was my grandmother's brother.
Yeah.
This is not some far-off historical figure. This is my grandmother's brother. We can all think of our grandmother. We can all think if they had a brother or not. That's who this occurred to. And I think with all the contention around history and telling history these days, this is part of that full history that needs to be told. So I'm really proud to have been able to contribute these artifacts. Hope that the museums will be able to use them in their educational programming and other purposes.
I'm sure they're so grateful, just as we are, for you sharing your story today. Thank you so much,
Thank
Michael,
you
for being here. Cannot wait to talk with you more.